Hello, I'm Reed Holson. Welcome to Sioux Falls Directions. We take some time to visit with each of the directors of the 12 city departments, 12 departments that do functions on their own but yet are interdependent on providing services for you as a citizen of Sioux Falls. And we want to welcome Mike Cooper here. I think, Mike, you're the Director of Planning and Building Services, but you have been a director of another department as well, too, in your past. Give us your background. I think you're one of the only directors that have done 2 departments in your career.
Sure. Well, when I came to the city of Sioux Falls in 1986 in the planning office and was assistant director of planning for a while. And then under one of our previous mayors, Gary Hansen, there was a vacancy with our director of Parks and Recreation. And so I got appointed to that in 1999 and enjoyed that a lot. It was a new venue for me. A lot of great things were accomplished. And then in 2005, when we had the retirement of Steve Metley as the Director of Planning and Building Services, Mayor Dave Munson appointed me to that position. And I've been there now under the Huther administration since 2005.
All right. It's a really comprehensive department. I mean, we see you on the news a lot. You're commenting about what's going on in and around Sioux Falls. Break down the divisions of your department.
So we always like to start with communicating our value, which kind of tells our story of what does this department really do, what service does it provide to the community. So you can kind of divide it up into 3 areas. One is we help manage the growth and development of the city. We help protect property, and we help make sure that buildings meet life safety codes. That's really our main purpose. So to do that, we have really 4 components of our department. We have the planning division, and that can include everything from short-term planning to long-range planning. We have the zoning enforcement division, and they deal with the zoning ordinance as well as reviewing development projects to make sure that they're in conformance. We have the building services division, which is the biggest within our department, and that includes the plan reviewers, the permit technicians, and all the inspections that we have. We have mechanical, we have plumbing, we have electrical and building. So those are the different components of that building services division. And then we also have property maintenance and code enforcement. We have a property maintenance group that enforces maintenance of existing buildings, as well as through code enforcement. We are working through enforcement of, during the growing season, what's called the nuisance vegetation ordinance, so grass and weeds. And then in the non-growing part of the year, which seems to be more and more all the time, is the snow removal for sidewalks. So that's kind of a broad spectrum of our department. Right now we have 46 FTEs, and across the board, those are the different major focuses that we have. I think another interesting part of our department, primarily say with the planning and zoning division, is that we also provide staff support to a number of advisory committees. And these are citizen appointed boards by the mayor and council. Probably the one that's most recognizable would be the Planning Commission. They typically meet every month, and they'll make recommendations on zoning changes or conditional use permits. And most of those recommendations end up going to the city council for final approval. But then we also have a zoning board of adjustment, and their function is looking at variances to the zoning ordinance for maybe a building setback or a height or a sign area, those kind of things. And then we also have a public transit advisory board. One of our other department responsibilities is that we're the liaison with our transit provider. So Sioux Area Metro is really privately operated, but all the equipment, all the infrastructure is owned by the city. And so we have a public transit advisory board that helps provide input, some recommendations on our public transit system. We have a board of historic preservation that oversees a number of our neighborhood historic districts. So new construction, renovation of buildings, if they're within those historic districts, including parts of downtown, would go through that board. We have a visual arts commission, and their function is primarily looking at the placement of public art, such as sculpture walk. So there's a there's a whole variety of advisory boards that we deal with along with our full-time staff functions.
And those are citizens that are involved in those boards. They have a chance to serve
Yes.
and have input in what happens with the city.
And it's really important to have that, I think, that public input, because although we provide the staff support and the staff liaison, when you're getting that outside perspective of, especially when you're dealing with property issues or property rights or design issues, it's always kind of nice to have another set of ears and eyes to review those things.
Mike, I'm sure you get this question, why so many rules? Because I'm sure back when you started back in planning, back early in your career, there weren't quite so many regulations, but they seem to change all the time. So why so many rules and ordinances and setbacks and all these things?
Sure, and they've grown, they've become more comprehensive, more complex than they used to be. I know that just a building code alone, a building code is many, many pages of requirements. And you look back on what they used to be, and it was a lot leaner, a lot less comprehensive. So that comes with the growth of the city. You know, we're going to be announcing a new population estimate in the near future, and we'll be over 180,000 easily. So you think back over the decades, how the city has expanded, not only in terms of population, but this geographical size. You know, we're close to 80 square miles of land area now. And you can look at other peer cities around us, ordinances, regulations, they go with the size of the community and with the growth of the community. And I would say in many cases, they started out maybe because of a citizen complaint or a citizen inquiry for many of these, and then they've just grown from there. But we have a pretty good process that we use for whether it's a building code amendment or a zoning ordinance amendment or a comprehensive plan update. Kind of going back to that citizen input, you know, we have different committees, different task forces, different processes that we can use to get that public review and comment before we go forward with something that ends up before a city council for final approval. But yeah, I mean, I would not disagree that the rules and regulations that we deal with now are much more comprehensive and much more complete than they used to be. But I will say that one of the things that we've tried to do over the years with that change in ordinances and regulations is that we've always tried to look at how does it impact customer service. You know, one of the things that happened the last couple of years at City Hall is we totally redid the ground floor service counter to make it a lot more customer friendly for the general public to come in and get their work done with this. But we also reach out to home builders, to multifamily housing association, to other organizations within the community to ask them, how are we doing? Are there ways that we can improve on our process? Because a lot of the things that I've talked about in terms of our areas of responsibility also impact other city departments. You can imagine that for a new construction, those plans are not only reviewed by our staff, but by engineering, by fire inspection. In the case of a restaurant, it would be the health department. So we have to look at how the whole team works. And one of the other things that we've been improving on the last couple of years is through a new software system called InterGov, that we can better communicate between city staff on a project. And so those are the kind of things that we're constantly looking at. How are we doing today, and what can we do better in the future?
The personality that your department puts on this city over time, I think, is interesting. At least I've noticed as I've traveled. You go to some cities and go, this is piled upon sprawl. Even the signage looks busy. Sioux Falls have a distinct approach to how they do those things so the city doesn't look like that and be sprawly, and also paying attention to neighborhoods and what neighborhoods need.
Well, we don't like to use the term urban sprawl. We like to use the term growth management. And I think that goes back to the mid to late 70s when a lot of that started with looking at projecting growth of the city out 10, 20 years through a comprehensive land use plan, and then also looking at more specific ways of implementing those plans on, say, a neighborhood level, whether it's a Cathedral neighborhood or a Whittier neighborhood or an All Saints neighborhood, monitoring the condition of buildings and monitoring the use of property. So that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of interaction with property owners, whether they're owners or renters. It goes back to some of the historic district initiatives that we've done over the years. And I think that's just another good way that we've been able to ensure that not only the newer parts of the city are developed properly, but also the core areas. And probably the core areas take as much or even more effort to make sure that that happens. And that's one reason that I think our property maintenance and our code enforcement group has really been strengthened just within the last 2 to 3 years to really focus more on that. And again, interacting with public works team or community development team or even police and fire, things like lighting and sidewalk conditions and street conditions. So it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of initiative to just make sure that you're watching and interacting with the public so that they know that you're paying attention to what some of their concerns are.
And there's a trend, obviously, in larger cities, and Sioux Falls as well, too, is to move back to the urban core.
And we've been seeing that the last couple of years. It's traditionally been called the millennials want to move back into the downtown area, and we're seeing some of that. Or we might also see empty nesters that are wanting to move into the core area of downtown. And so it kind of started out a few years ago that a number of the old warehouse buildings got converted to loft apartments. And then when those gradually filled up, we started to see some new development with more multifamily and now with condominiums. So I think, again, that's the trend that is going on in downtown Sioux Falls. And we're seeing that that's going to continue pretty strongly the next few years as we go forward into 2018 and beyond. So that lifestyle that people want to see downtown is bringing kind of a new life, new vitality to downtown. You know, now we have a hardware store downtown, and soon we're going to have a drugstore downtown. So these kind of services that you would typically see in more the surrounding neighborhoods are now coming back into downtown, and kind of goes back to when I grew up in Sioux Falls in the 60s. You know, downtown was the hub of retail and activity, and then gradually those businesses moved out to the malls and to the suburban areas. And it's interesting to see how the cycle of that is changing, and now it's kind of coming back again to downtown.
Say, Mike, what does your department mean to us as homeowners or residents or renters in Sioux Falls? What should we be doing to be good citizens from a code enforcement perspective?
So from a code enforcement perspective, there's kind of two ways. If you're involved in a rental unit, whether you're an owner or a tenant, all rental property has to be registered with the city through our code enforcement process. So the main purpose of that is so that we have a contact person or a management company if something comes up in terms of a complaint or an issue that we need to find out about. Plus it also just kind of helps us know where those rental properties are located. If you're involved in an owner of a vacant building, that also has to be registered with the city. Again, so that we can keep an eye on if there's a vacant building, to make sure that it's secure, to make sure that the outside is being maintained, whether it's the yard or the sidewalks. So that's a pretty big part of code enforcement and property maintenance is the property or the rental registration process. And we spent a lot of time, as I said before, of enforcing the nuisance vegetation ordinance during
tall grass
and weeds. Mm-hmm. And that includes both public and private property, as well as the sidewalk snow removal. So that's pretty big. And what we've seen is that we do a really good job of, when we're able to notify people, that compliance rate is usually around 95%. So it's that 5% of people that we typically would have to go back and either do a citation or even use our own contractor to perform the corrections, whether it's removing the snow or doing the mowing. But that's a pretty big deal, and we spend a lot of time working with property owners on that. So in terms of the general public, if they see a neighboring property that looks like it's a concern, whether it's occupied or vacant, then they could just contact the city through the website is probably the best way to let us know what's going on. And then in terms of building codes or building construction, with all the different codes that we have to enforce, for the typical, let's say, homeowner, if they're doing a remodeling job, if they're hiring a contractor, or even if they're doing some of the work themselves, they really need to check with us to find out what those code requirements are and what kind of permits they need to get approved for, and then how the follow-up inspections work. Because again, the purpose of those building codes, those other mechanical, plumbing, electrical codes that we enforce are really focused on life safety. And we want to make sure that the structures are safe to occupy and that the work is done so that they are done correctly. So it's pretty easy to find out. We have that service counter at City Hall. And one of the things that we just started rolling out was the customer service aspect, that people can go online and start to request some permits. Not everything is available yet, but we're going to continue to expand that so that to try to make it a little easier for things like fence permits or whatever it might be. So I would just say to the general public to be aware and to ask, and especially if you're doing some work or thinking about doing some of the work yourself, to make sure you know what those rules and regulations are going to require.
So you'll help us make decisions between doing a fixer-upper thing that's simple versus just doing my basement over again without getting a permit. You'll be able to guide us on what needs to be done or not need to be done. Whether
you're doing a remodeling project inside the house or adding a deck or a 3-season addition, whatever it might be. So, yeah, it's important to give a call and find out what's going on. Better be safe than sorry.
Exactly, because you may have to do it all over again, right?
That has happened before.
Has it? I bet it has. We're going to take a break thanks to Mike Cooper. When we come back, let's talk about the future. Mike's, is a person that knows what's coming and how we may be growing in the city of Sioux Falls, that and more, when we come back on Directions.
The Midco Aquatic Center is hiring part-time lifeguard positions, work while going to school, flexible schedules, and bonus opportunities available. No certification needed to apply. Find out more information at midcoaquaticcenter.org/employment.
Welcome back to Sioux Falls Directions on CityLink, where we sit down and have conversations with each of the 12 directors of the city of Sioux Falls so you can get to know them and their people and their purpose in the city of Sioux Falls. And we're with Planning and Building Services Director Mike Cooper today. Mike, we just keep growing, and it just doesn't stop. You had mentioned earlier in the program there's going to be a new population estimate coming out. We're still growing.
Well, we're just coming off the 5th year in a row of record building construction activity, and actually 6 years in a row that we've increased. And it's really reflective of how strong our local economy is. So for 2017, we hit almost $740 million worth of building construction for everything from residential to commercial to manufacturing. We added just over 2,400 new housing units last year, which would include apartments, single-family, townhomes. And so as we look at those numbers and those statistics, that helps us come up with a new population estimate, which we'll be doing sometime during the month of January to, again, estimate. It's an estimate of how much growth we've seen. We ended 2016, started out 2016 at 178,500 people, which was about a 5,000 increase from the previous year. So I would say that we'll be somewhere in that range of 4,000 to 5,000 new people. And it's kind of interesting to break down where all that new construction was. And for 2017, on the residential side, people have commented, I can't believe all those apartments going up all over the city. Probably for the last 3 or 4 years we've heard that. And that's true, and I think for 2018, we'll potentially see some of that multifamily growth slow down a little bit as a number of those units that are under construction get completed and get occupied. But for last year, one of the interesting figures that came out was when you look at single family and townhomes, it was almost evenly split with the apartments. So we're starting to see that trend of a little stronger demand for the single family townhomes and maybe a little bit of a softening of the market of multifamily, which again is starting to happen in some of the other metropolitan areas as well. Even some of those millennials that we keep hearing about that want to live downtown, that want to rent, I think we're starting to see some of those that maybe if they're getting into their late 20s, early 30s, are starting to think about, well, maybe I should move out of my apartment and look at buying a house or buying a townhome. So I think that trend will continue in 2018. For 2017, the main three areas that we saw in terms of big permits, one was manufacturing. The new windshield factory, which is a refrigerated warehouse distribution building currently under construction up on the northwest part of the city in what we call Foundation Park, was our largest single permit at over $32 million last year. Another manufacturing project is the new Gage Brothers plant. They're going to be relocating from their current site on West 12th Street out to an area by I-229 and Benson Road. They have a brand new state-of-the-art plant that's underway now. And so those are two big manufacturing areas of construction activity. The other area would be medical. I mean, for years, the hospitals have really driven a lot of the growth and construction activity of the city. And 2017 was no exception. Sanford has started their new clinic out on Ellis Road in conjunction with another Lewis drugstore. And of course, the big one at 69th and Louise is the new Avera hospital campus that is just starting to get underway with their project in 2017. And so then the multifamily, and then we can't leave out the other component last year is what we call municipal, with our new city administration building, which is going to be really exciting. When we talked earlier about customer service and how we can support the community, I think the new administration building is really going to be a way to improve that as we go into this year and forward.
Spreading out on the edges of the city, where are the hot areas right now that you're foreseeing for the next year or two?
Well, one of the hot areas will be downtown, and I think downtown will see record construction this year with a new Levitt shell that the city's starting through the City Parks Department up at Falls Park West. The Cascade, which is the new multifamily project up on North Phillips and 2nd Street. That will be new multifamily construction. The new city mixed-use parking ramp project will get underway this year. The new Hotel Phillips project, which is the old bank at 9th and Phillips, is being converted into a really interesting 92-unit hotel, and a number of other projects that I think we'll see get started in 2018 that I believe will easily set a new record for overall construction activity just within the downtown Sioux Falls. Foundation Park, as I mentioned, with wind chill, I wouldn't be surprised to hear some other announcements during the year of some other development up in that area. Lake Lorraine is one that has been on the radar for years. In recent years, you'll see some more announcements out there for retail, hotel, other destination venues. Back on the east side, Dolly Farm has gone a little bit slower in recent years, but there's still some things happening out there. Residential will continue out in that area. And then in the south central part of town, you can kind of go around to different major streets, major intersections. That 85th in Minnesota continues to see new development. And so we're going to continue to see pockets of growth pretty much in all sectors of the community. And so I would again say that people can watch for 2018 overall to be a real strong year for all sectors of the economy, whether it's residential, commercial, or there are other types of business development.
As we look at Highway 100 connecting with I-90 in the northeast section of town, the eastern section, what's that going to mean for that side of Sioux Falls when that's done in around 2019 or 2020?
It's going to be big because a major part of our development is based on infrastructure. And so our city capital improvement program is pretty important as how we manage, how we prioritize, how we fund different projects, whether it's a road or a water or sewer system, because development doesn't happen without infrastructure. And so a big project like Veterans Parkway going up to Interstate 90 over the next 2 years is really going to draw even more attraction for development along that east side. And so that's really important. We've had developers, home builders watching that project since it started and are really anxious to see that last segment, which is going to be the most comprehensive, the most complex, to go from Rice Street up to Interstate 90 to begin in this year and go into 2019. So those major roadways, and you can go around the city, whether it's an 85th Street or a 69th Street, or improving Minnesota Avenue or Western Avenue, or even last year when the city reconstructed Louise Avenue. That's a huge impact on property owners and businesses. But once it's done, it really makes the driving experience a lot better. And as our Public Works Director, Mark Cotter, would say, smoother roads ahead.
That's right. One last question.
Sure.
I'm sure you get it a lot. It's selfish on my aspect as well too, but all of us in our neighborhoods are going, hey, it's growing in our neighborhood. When do we get those pockets of services, the restaurants, the gas stations, the drugstores, those types of things? When do those follow and how do they come? How does that work?
So it's really interesting to watch how the retail section of the city grows, particularly in the neighborhoods, as you say. And the guiding factor that we always hear from brokers and real estate people is that retail follows the rooftops. So you have to have the rooftops in a certain density, a certain number to draw the retail uses. But what we try to do with our growth management plan is we try to identify with these outlying neighborhoods, particularly at the major intersections, areas that we can appropriately develop, whether it's a convenience store or an office or a drugstore, whatever it might be, or a restaurant, because it seems like this community can never have enough restaurants.
That's right.
And everybody has their favorite one that they're still waiting to get.
As you can see, Mike's department has a lot to do with how City of Sioux Falls runs and how it grows and how it's maintained and how we keep it looking nice as well too. The 40-plus employees there are working hard. And if you want to learn more about planning and building services, and as Mike said, report maybe concerns that you have in your neighborhood about length of weeds or grass or snow shoveling, it's all on the front page of our website at siouxfalls.org, and you can click on departments to look into more about planning and building services if you'd like. Thank you so much for watching Directions. I'm Reed Holson. We'll see you next time.